Zionism, today, albeit not a common word, is a word that is being thrown around. But what is Zionism really? What is it about? How does it involve or affect Jews and Judaism? Sit back, relax, and let's dive into it. Before we continue, please don't forget to like and subscribe and check out our other videos too, where we talk about religion and other random stuff. Zionism is a Jewish nationalist movement that has had as its goal the creation and support of a Jewish national state in Palestine, the ancient homeland of the Jews. Hebrew, Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. Though Zionism originated in Eastern and Central Europe in the latter part of the 19th century, it is in many ways a continuation of the ancient attachment of the Jews and of the Jewish religion to the historical region of Palestine, where one of the hills of ancient Jerusalem was called Zion. In the 16th and 17th centuries, a number of quote-unquote messiahs came forward trying to persuade Jews to quote-unquote return to Palestine. The Haskalah, Jewish Enlightenment, movement of the late 18th century, however, urged Jews to assimilate into Western secular culture. In the early 19th century, interest in a return of the Jews to Palestine was kept alive mostly by Christian millenarians. Despite the Haskalah, Eastern European Jews did not assimilate and, in reaction to Tsarist pogroms, formed the Hovevai Zion, Lovers of Zion, to promote the settlement of Jewish farmers and artisans in Palestine. A political turn was given to Zionism by Theodor Herzl, an Austrian journalist who regarded assimilation as most desirable but, in view of anti-Semitism, impossible to realize. Thus, he argued, if Jews were forced by external pressure to form a nation, they could lead a normal existence only through concentration in one territory. In 1897, Herzl convened the first Zionist Congress at Basel, Switzerland, which drew up the Basel program of the movement, stating that Zionism strives to create for the Jewish people a home in Palestine secured by public law. The center of the movement was established in Vienna, where Herzl published the official weekly Die Welt, The World. Zionist congresses met yearly until 1901 and then every 2 years. When the Ottoman government refused Herzl's request for Palestinian autonomy, he found support in Great Britain. In 1903, the British government offered 6,000 square miles, 15,500 square kilometers of uninhabited Uganda for settlement. But the Zionists held out for Palestine. At the death of Herzl in 1904, the leadership moved from Vienna to Cologne and then to Berlin. Prior to World War I, Zionism represented only a minority of Jews, mostly from Russia, but led by Austrians and Germans. It developed propaganda through orators and pamphlets, created its own newspapers, and gave an impetus to what was called a Jewish Renaissance in letters and arts. The development of the modern Hebrew language largely took place during that period. The failure of the Russian Revolution of 1905 and the wave of pogroms and repressions that followed caused growing numbers of Russian Jewish youth to emigrate to Palestine as pioneer settlers. By 1914, there were about 90,000 Jews in Palestine. 13,000 settlers lived in 43 Jewish agricultural settlements, many of them supported by the French Jewish philanthropist Baron Edmond de Rothschild. Upon the outbreak of World War I, political Zionism reasserted itself, and its leadership passed to Russian Jews living in England. Two such Zionists, Chaim Weizmann and Nahum Sokolow, were instrumental in obtaining the Balfour Declaration from Great Britain, November 2, 1917. which promised British support for the creation of a Jewish national home in Palestine. The declaration was included in Britain's League of Nations mandate over Palestine, 1922. In the following years, the Zionists built up the Jewish urban and rural settlements in Palestine, perfecting autonomous organizations and solidifying Jewish cultural life and Hebrew education. In March 1925, the Jewish population in Palestine was officially estimated at 108,000, and it rose to about 238,000, 20% of the population, by 1933. Jewish immigration remained relatively slow, however, until the rise of Hitler in Europe. Nevertheless, the Arab population feared that Palestine would eventually become a Jewish state and bitterly resisted Zionism and the British policy supporting it. British forces struggled to maintain order in the face of a series of Arab uprisings. The strain of suppressing the Arab Revolt of 1936-39, which was more extensive and sustained than earlier uprisings, ultimately led Britain to reassess its policies. In hopes of keeping the peace between Jews and Palestinian Arabs and retaining immigration to Palestine. The large-scale extermination of European Jews by the Nazis led many Jews to seek refuge in Palestine, and many others, especially in the United States, to embrace Zionism. As tensions grew among Arabs and Zionists, Britain submitted the Palestine problem first to Anglo-US discussion for a solution, and later to the United Nations, which on November 29, 1947, proposed partition of the country into separate Arab and Jewish states and the internationalization of Jerusalem. The creation of the State of Israel on May 14, 1948, triggered an invasion by the neighboring Arab countries that was soundly defeated by the Israeli army. By the time armistice agreements were signed in 1949, Israel held more land than had been allotted to it under the UN partition plan. About 800,000 Arabs had also fled or been expelled from the area that became Israel. Thus, 50 years after the First Zionist Congress and 30 years after the Balfour Declaration, Zionism achieved its aim of establishing a Jewish state in Palestine. But at the same time, it became an armed camp surrounded by hostile Arab nations and Palestinian organizations engaged in terrorism in and outside Israel. This is just a mere summarization of what Zionism is. Subscribe to see more and have an amazing day.